the one with the worst best man ever is the 22nd episode of the 4th season of Friends. This is directed by Peter Bonerz, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I talk about what happens in this episode. Unusually, I don't have that many notes. I don't have that much to say about this episode, and I feel like not a lot happens. That's not to say it's bad. I don't dislike this episode. I've never disliked this episode, but at the same time, it's certainly not a personal favourite. So I will explain what happens and share some thoughts, but to be honest, I don't have that many thoughts. I can sum up briefly and just say, it's good, I like it. There were no real quotes in this that I love, and there was nothing specific, or there isn't anything specific that really stands out to me, except maybe an element of unpredictability. Obviously, I've seen this episode many times, but I feel like what happens that makes the best man the worst best man ever was maybe unpredictable. If you've just watched this for the first time, or indeed if you can remember how you first felt about this, I'd love to know if you think it's unpredictable. There will be spoilers from now, and there are two main parts to the narrative, and I think that is one of the reasons why I have so few notes, because pretty much every episode of Friends, there are exceptions, but most episodes have at least three main parts to the narrative, and that's because they try and get at least some story focusing on every character. But here we only have two parts because basically we have the boys' story and the girls' story. The boys' story revolves around the bachelor plans. The girls revolves around Phoebe and Phoebe's baby shower. So I'll talk about Phoebe first. And this happens because the girls are not invited to Ross's bachelor party. Understandable. So they decide to get back at the guys by having a baby shower for Phoebe. And initially, Monica plans on giving the babies little outfits, and they're absolutely adorable. But then they realise Phoebe won't be the one to dress the babies in those outfits. So they decide that the gifts in the baby shower are going to be gifts that Phoebe can use after the birth, which seems like a sensible approach. Immediately, we cut to Phoebe being rather nasty about the leather pants that she was given. And I think one of the reasons why I don't love this episode, again, I don't dislike it, but Phoebe is uncharacteristically really nasty in this episode. It's pregnancy hormones. Sure, it doesn't necessarily excuse her nastiness, but it is the reason behind it. And we then see her being horrible to Rachel because of her issue with Ross and not going to the wedding, and Phoebe is really horrible about that. And again, there is a reason for it. It's an atypical response from Phoebe. Maybe one could argue it's a little bit interesting because it's a different side of Phoebe we don't normally see, but at the same time, I don't particularly love it. She then has contractions, and this ends up being false labour. But my favourite bit, genuinely a bit that I do find very funny, is when Rachel has to go and get the book so they can find out more about this, and she just grabs the Bible, and it was just a really brilliant panic response that I can see happening in real life. It's an okay part of the episode. It definitely helps to solidify the fact that Phoebe is clearly getting closer to the birth of the babies. This is definitely something that I think is made apparent here, and I think up until this point, the passage of time has been unclear. Because, I'll be honest, up until this point, I don't think it's clear whether she was 3 months pregnant or 5 months pregnant, or, as we get an indication here, much closer to the 9 months. So I think that was a good idea to kind of help us get a better sense of the time frame. We then go to the bachelor party. And Joey has actually organised this with some t-shirt souvenirs, and the reason Joey is Ross's best man is because Chandler was Ross's best man, and Joey is hurt by this. So Chandler says, don't worry, you can be best man at my wedding. And of course, Ross is hurt that Chandler gets to be his best man twice, and he doesn't get to be Chandler's best man. It's not a comfortable position to be in. I feel like just having two best men would have been the best scenario. I don't know if that's a thing, but it definitely would have made sense. But nevertheless, Joey is in charge of the party, and they invite a couple of dinosaur guys, and Gunther, Chandler referred to Gunther as Gunther Central Perk at one point in this episode, which I thought was rather adorable. And they also invite the stripper. And at the end of the party, we don't get to see very much of it, Joey starts to talk to the stripper, and the next thing we know, he wakes up and he says stripper, and she's not there, and then he looks over and the ring has gone from the box. I do have one question. Would you give the ring to the best man that early in advance? That seems unwise. I don't know, if I was getting married, I would not want to let the rings out of my possession until it was time to get married. But if it is common practice to give a ring to the best man far in advance of when it's actually needed, feel free to let me know. But to me, that seemed a little bit strange, and therefore the rest of the episode is a little bit unbelievable, but nevertheless, also unpredictable. Because obviously they deduce from this that the stripper stole the ring. Apparently the police are not interested. So Chandler actually comes up with a clever plan. And I rather like Chandler's switch here, because up until this point, he's basically just been making fun of Joey for losing the ring, delighting in the fact that since he was no longer best man, things are going wrong. But realising Ross's panic, Chandler does kind of switch things around, and he actually starts to be helpful and taking the situation more serious, which I think was a really nice thing to do. And he suggests, kind of cleverly, I guess, calling the stripper, making an appointment. Is it called an appointment? I doubt it. Calling the stripper and booking her to go to his office at work, which seems very unprofessional, but nevertheless, this is what he does under the name of Gunther Central Perk. And she goes to his office and they confront her, and of course she hasn't stolen the ring. She denies it, and they're trying to work out where the ring could be when they're back at the apartment, and they notice the duck. The ring is in the duck, and the duck goes to the vet, and everything's going to be fine, and we have a nice exchange between them and working out who should really be the best man, and it's a sweet moment. I liked it. I definitely liked it. So it is a good episode. I do think the whole thing with the duck was unpredictable. As I said, I can't remember how I felt about this episode when I first saw it, but I feel like the ring being in the duck is certainly not what I would have predicted. And I don't love Phoebe in this episode. I hope that that's understandable. But aside from that, it's not a bad episode. In my opinion, it's not the funniest, it's not the most fascinating narrative. We don't have really any quotes that I like. Again, there's nothing wrong with it. I just, compared to the average Friends episode, where there's usually at least one or two things that I just absolutely adore, something that's become part of my vocabulary over the years, there's nothing really like this in this episode. So I can't say the one with the worst best man ever is a bad episode. I don't want to say that. But I also can't say that I love it. Would I skip it? No, I don't think I would. But I doubt it's an episode that I'll ever seek out. If I'm in the mood to watch a random episode of Friends, the one with the worst best man ever is unlikely to be one that I'd select. But nevertheless, it's still not too bad.